Welcome, Venerable.
Hi, everybody. Happy to see you all.
How are you?
Yes, good. Tara,
Yes.
Nina, Carol. I've only got 3 pictures on each page on the phone, so I'll give up. I can only see on the silly old phone. So anyway, I'm happy to be here, everybody.
Excellent.
Yes.
Wonderful to see you, Venerable. Wonderful to see everybody. Thank you very much.
So what's the plan, Tara? Let's go.
So go ahead, Nina.
Yes, I will go ahead and share the mandala and will offer the mandala.
Good, yes. So everybody, as you're doing this prayer, imagine, use your creative imagination, think of all the marvelous things in the world that people use, pile them all up and happily offer to the Buddha as a request for the teaching. There's Dorji Chung behind me. You can see, just think of the Buddha right there. And we happily offer as a request for the teaching.
Sajipaki Jukshin Metok Videgyen Padi Sangye Hindu Mite Uwahi Rokunam Dakjila Chupashok Jetsun Lama Dampakyenam Ki Chukukala Kien Chudin Trik Jita Tsampei Dujay Mala Zabye Chuki Chapa Waptu Sur Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamiyatayami. Venerable, we cannot hear you. You are muted.
It wasn't even unmuted, but it keeps doing it. You can hear me now?
We can hear you now, Venerable.
Okay. So we think we're going to continue these crazy teachings where we try to learn to see bad things as good, completely nutty, but we try to see the logic of it, continue these teachings as a most radical method to quickly achieve bodhicitta. That's the purpose behind all these teachings. So I think this is our last one, isn't it, Tara, on this module?
Yes, it is. It's our last one.
Okay, so let's summarize what we've done so far. First, again, let's look at it in the big picture. Let's look at where it fits in the entire Lam Rim. And it's part of the great scope, or I like to call it university level. It's the compassion wing of the 2 wings, wisdom and compassion. It's the point of all the teachings. Everything's leading to this. But as His Holiness says, compassion is not enough. You've got to have wisdom. That's the first and second scope, low scope, great scope, or as I call it, junior school, high school, which is all the nuts and bolts of all the teachings about karma and the mind that we apply ourselves in order to understand our suffering and its causes so that we can be free of our suffering and its causes. So the first and second scopes are all about ourself. And my sense is in our culture, we miss the real point behind all these teachings. We kind of hear it in a typical kind of religious way of we're supposed to be a good person, then we'll get rewarded, and if we're not a good person we get punished. This concept is very deep in our minds, you know, so we don't really engage very powerfully in the real purpose of it, which is this cause and effect. And so, and you know, the real purpose of Buddha's teachings is actually to help us generate what we call incredible love and compassion for ourselves, because we are sick of suffering, and we're now, Buddha's locating for us the main causes of suffering, and we're buying into that, and the main causes of our suffering and our happiness are ourselves. So it's a very powerful concept, this concept of karma. We've really got to engage in it, and when we really do engage in it, it really brings incredible power. It brings self-confidence, it brings courage, And it, of course, brings our own happiness. But we don't hear it this way, We just don't hear it that way. We need to. Then we have enthusiasm for practice. And this is all. So in other words, the first and second scopes, or the wisdom wing, is all about ourself. We are the beneficiary of these teachings. We are the direct beneficiary. The main purpose behind these teachings and behind the vows within this level of teachings, of the 3 sets of vows, is to protect ourselves from future suffering, which means that, flip it over, is to give ourselves future happiness. So we should engage in this with joy and delight, but we don't. It's kind of forbidding and negative, and I'm bad and I'm going to get punished. I'm going to go and blah, blah, blah. We really have this very neurotic way of hearing it. So when we really engage in it, it gives us enthusiasm. And then, of course, it's the basis of being able to go to the compassion wing when you start to open your eyes and you realize everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's suffering. And really, and they say the bodhisattvas have the greatest compassion for us, not even because we haven't realized emptiness, but because we don't realize cause and effect. That every sentient being out there completely going crazy, suffering and blaming everybody else and not knowing that they are the cause of it and that they could be the cause of their own happiness. So this is the basis of incredible compassion, but you will not get that if you don't get it for yourself first. So we continue to work on our mind. From here to Buddhahood, you never stop working on your mind. This is it. You're all the way from to here to Buddhahood, you're lessening delusions and growing the goodness until eventually you've perfected it. That never stops, but the emphasis is fundamentally different. In the first scopes, the main purpose is to protect you from future suffering. You are the main beneficiary. But of course, as Lama Zopa says, the rats and the cockroaches will also be happy. They'll have a party because you leave them in peace. But you are the direct beneficiary. You are the focus. That's the wisdom wing. And now the compassion wing, continue to work on your mind, but the focus now is others. And so you're lessening the delusions now, not so much to stop you from suffering, but to help you help others. That's the emphasis here. And the other thing that's radically different, or not radically, but different emphasis. The main problem, the main cause of all suffering, as far as Buddha is concerned in the Four Noble Truths, is attachment. But on the compassion wing, it's framed differently. It's called self-cherishing. And why? It's very specific. It's very clear. Self-cherishing is just the nice word the Tibetans use for what we would say is selfishness, putting me first. Attachment is all about that, but it's not framed like that. Attachment is just emotional hunger that only wants what I want and has a panic attack when it doesn't get what I want. And they're the delusions, attachment, aversion, and all the rest. But here, the emphasis is we're trying to put others first. We're trying to help others. So we're trying to lessen one of the main consequences of attachment, which is to put me first. So this is why we're trying to shift from self-cherishing to cherishing others. This paradigm shift in the mind. That's the main enemy on the compassion wing. Putting me first. We're trying to put others first. That's the idea. And when we've got that, that's bodhicitta. When we've perfected that, that's bodhicitta. Two main things about bodhicitta. One is only others arise in your mind. This is a very shocking concept to us. There's no such thing in modern psychology. You sound weird. When you've got bodhicitta, there's no concept of I. I mean, you're I, you're not silly. Nina won't think she's Jeff and get confused. When she's got bodhicitta, she knows she's Nina. But the usual way that I is the central player in our head, that doesn't occur anymore. This is hard to imagine, isn't it? So the first one is only others, and then whoever's in front of you, it's your job. Lucky they're your most precious child. But the long-term goal of bodhicitta, the long-term one, the fierce enthusiasm the bodhisattva has to never give up, no matter how many lifetimes it takes, to perfect the mind one step at a time, to accumulate the wisdom and merit that's necessary to become a Buddha. No matter how many lifetimes it takes, it doesn't matter. This enthusiasm the bodhisattvas have. So the way it's been done in the Discovering Buddhism, we've got 2 modules related to bodhicitta. The first one, generally, and now this one, which is actually the major technique for accomplishing, the most radical technique for accomplishing bodhicitta. The one that's favored by all the Tibetans, the exchanging self for others. And these 8 verses, which we've been using as our basis, are this classic little kind of text, these 8 little seemingly simple little verses, I mean, I like to say that when you have to squeeze your brain, as Lama Yeshe says, especially when you understand emptiness. These verses are so simple, they're like a joke, simple English, cute, sweet, simple. But you've got to really, these are, for me, more profound, not more profound, more difficult. Seems to me wisdom is easier, This is outrageous, these verses. They're kind of outrageous. And they were literally kept secret. I mean, it sounds ridiculous. We think Tantra's secret, These were kept secret. And even as Milarepa says, whatever's Dharma, the world is opposite. So these are radically opposite to the world. And especially the way we think about things these days in the deeply suffering world that we live in. These verses are quite shocking, you know. So we have to carefully listen to them. And as Babong Rinpoche says, I've been saying repeatedly, you need to be a suitable vessel to practice these practices, to hear them properly, you know. So I forget what verse we got up to. What was it, Tara?
So we did 7 and we actually did do 7 and 8. And then you made a note that you wanted to talk about self-cherishing more.
No, I want to talk about emptiness more. I mentioned I'd say the word self-cherishing. I didn't use that word much. It's true. Yes, that's right. Exactly. Let's just go through summarize. Thank you, Tara. Let's go through all the verses again, just briefly. Okay. So to say them in our own words, the first one is this general statement where we want to hold all sentient beings as most kind, most dear at all times. Why? Because you want to get bodhicitta, because on the basis of this incredible compassion, you need suffering. This is the whole way they talk. In order to get compassion, it's really obvious. You need sentient beings. You need suffering sentient beings. You need to know about them. That's why you think about Buddha's life. His father protected him from seeing suffering. He tried to hide suffering from his son, because he knew from the time he was a tiny baby, you know, all the great the soothsayers said that he was going to be a great a spiritual teacher, and his father didn't want to lose him. So he knew if he saw suffering, he'd want to, you know, help them. So he tried to prevent him from seeing suffering. So it's very evident, if you live in a gorgeous life with no suffering around you, how can you possibly have compassion? It's literally impossible. I mean, it's literally impossible. So it's in this way they say that we need suffering sentient beings. We rely upon suffering sentient beings. So that's why in this first line, in the first verse, in order to get the benefit from all these sufferings, get the benefit from these suffering sentient beings, they're grist for our mill. I'm going to hold them as most dear because they're most precious. They're most precious to me. Because without these suffering sentient beings, it's not possible for me to get compassion, which means it's not possible to get bodhicitta. So clearly the aim behind these verses is pretty intense. It implies already an incredible level of compassion and love, you know, of the author. It's clear. The second verse is now one of the many instructions, you know, the specific instructions. Now, each verse is quite specific. The next one is basically the practice of practicing when you're with others, seeing qualities in them. That's the way to put it, to see qualities in other people that specifically are better than you. So in other words, it's to counteract that deeply instinctive, even if we're nice people, we have this deeply instinctive impulse because of ego grasping and because of self-cherishing to put ourselves up higher. Always to find fault, which means to find fault in other people, to find fault based on the assumption I don't have it. We all do that automatically. The world does that. Always pointing out, look at the terrible people out there. Look at what they're doing. Look at the Mr. Trump. Look at those evil people. Look at those monsters. Look at those warmongers. I mean, as if we don't have any delusions. It's quite shocking. So it's a really powerful practice, especially if people you don't like, to find something good in one of those people which is better than you. A prettier nose, you know, thinner, nicer hair, more intelligent, better at mathematics, something precise. It's a very precise practice that they're better than you, which means they're higher, you're lower. We don't like saying those words, but that's literally true. If Tara gets 97% in the math exam and I get 95, then she's higher than me. It's very simple. But we get very offended to hear that. Oh my God, Tara's better than me. I'll kill myself. Ridiculous, you know. It's a good practice. And you can do that anytime you like. You see some ugly maniac on the street. You think immediately find criticism, find fault, find something better about, you know, maybe his ears are much nicer than yours and delight in his ears and yours are not so nice. It's a very good practice. It's very precise. Third one is, it just seems to be sort of to me out a bit different from all the rest. Watching your mind like a hawk. The moment you see a delusion, you avert it immediately because it endangers you and others, which is really the essence of Buddhist practice every day. And these next three that are kind of like the heavy duty ones, you know, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I like to think the number 4 is sort of when you read the papers and look at the news and you look at the world out there and you hear about all the psychopaths and the maniacs and the warmongers and the bomb throwers and the rapists and the murderers and the terrorists. I mean, it says most rare. I mean, back in 10th century Tibet, they were probably rare, but not in our world. So how are you going to think about them? You're going to act like you found a precious treasure. Why, in the name of heaven, you want to see them as a precious treasure? Because you're going to have such compassion for them, because not only are they negative, but they're suffering. And that's what we have to understand karma. In the world now, if we see maniacs and pedophiles and psychopaths, we love all our Greek words, don't we? I always point this out. Then we know they're terrible, but we don't ever think that they're suffering. That's a massive point. And if we don't get karma at the beginning for ourselves, we won't understand this point, which is the basis of why you should have compassion for the pedophiles and the maniacs and the psychopaths, because they are harming themselves terribly because they're driven by their own past negative karma, and they're harming others and therefore harming themselves unbearably and for countless future lifetimes. That's the basis. That's the specific basis of compassion for the crazies. So they're a precious treasure for you. The next one is getting closer to home. I think it's like at work, verse 5. My feeling is in a broader environment. When you're accused of something you didn't do, someone's jealous of you, resentful of you, so they blame you for something. It's very, very common in families, in organizations. It's very, very common. In Dharma centers, I'm sorry, it's very common. And you're devastated because you know you didn't do that thing. Well, what's the practice here? Offer the victory to them. Apologize. You're right. I'm wrong. This is heavy duty, I tell you. This is panic-stricken. This is something that is so primordially instinctive to defend ourselves. You know, even if we're high beings, the first instinct is to defend me, especially if you didn't do it. Even when you did do it, we still defend ourselves. Even if we did break that cup, we're still trying to defend ourselves. This is incredible, this one. Offer the victory. This is incredible. So, of course, these techniques are in your toolkit. You've got hundreds of toolkits, more the Dharma. All the instructions are all tools to use. So clearly you don't use them every time. You use them according to the situation. But when you can, this one is very powerful. To smashes the self-cherishing. It smashes the ego grasping, the assumption of a me, you know. This is very powerful. And verse 6 is really close to home. It's like the number of people whose beloved husbands, whom you've sacrificed your life for, your husband, your wife, your children, and they reject you. They throw you out. If a person whom you've given your life for, whom you sacrifice your life for, whom you've given so much to, and they reject you, you'll see them as your precious guru. I mean, these teachings are so intense, I tell you, so absolutely intense. But we have to understand them properly. Specifically, each of them is attacking a particular approach, a particular delusion. Why do you want to attack your delusions? Because you want to get bodhicitta. You want to smash the enemy as quickly as possible. And the enemy is your self-cherishing and your ego grasping. So it already implies pretty intense level of realizations, you know. So you do your best. You read these verses and you aspire. Even if you can't do it now, you aspire. May I be able to do this one day? And the last two verses, the seventh one, is where Tonglen comes from. We discussed that. That's where all these techniques culminate in this little practice that you can do as a meditation, where you're going to give to others. You're going to take upon yourself. You're going to give to others your happiness, your joy, your merit, your goodness, and you take upon yourself secretly, it says, secretly, all their suffering, all their pain, all their negativity. So like we discussed when we said this practice, you know, Tonglen, Westerners love it. I'm always very surprised. It's so intense. But I think we misunderstand it too. We think it's, we think the point about it is this. When you're doing this meditation, you're visualizing, you know, your beloved with a headache, and you're breathing in the headache, and you're wishing you had the headache and not them. Of course, the natural feeling is you're supposed to be getting a headache. This is really clearly absurd. You're not trying to get a headache. You're trying very specifically to feel that if you could, you would. Rather you have it than them. So the purpose of it, the second thing is it's not a healing technique. This is one of the common ones we think. It's not a healing technique. In a sense, it's got nothing to do with your beloved and their headache. You're not trying to get rid of their headache. You're trying to, it's you using them in front of you as a method for you to develop the courage that if you could, you would have their headache rather than them. So it's just, again, a technique for you to smash self-cherishing. There are lots of healing techniques, but this is not a healing technique. And you will not get a headache, I promise. But you have to sit on meditation to do it. You can do it every day. You walk down the street, you see a person with a crutch, you know, broken leg. You just think right there, I wish I could have a broken leg instead. I wish I could walk freely. That thought, that 1 miniature thought, so beyond outrageous, so shocking, like an atomic bomb. on self-cherishing, attachment, ego grasping, and everything. Just a simple thought. Having compassion is great. So compassion is, oh my God, look at that poor person with a headache, with a broken leg. Great compassion, something I mentioned, I think, but I'll mention it again. This is the unique characteristic of the bodhisattva. It's the outrageous, brave attitude of the bodhisattva that has to be cultivated. It's on top of compassion. It's called great compassion, mahakaruna. So just a nice word. It's a specific level of compassion, and you must cultivate it. And it's the unique one of the bodhisattva path. And it's the one that goes, what can I do to help, to fix it? That's really courageous. A mother has that for her baby. Mothers have that for their children. They see, I always think of the example of, you know, at the beach, and your baby is in the water, drowning. You're going to have compassion, no question. But you're not going to look around wondering who's going to save your baby. Even if you can't swim, you're in that water. That we know. That's great compassion. Of course, mothers have got attachment too. But great compassion is this brave attitude of the bodhisattva. His Holiness used to call it universal responsibility. But you've got to cultivate that as a very courageous view. What can I do? What can I do to fix it? What can I do? It's my job. And as Amos Zopa says, I myself alone. This brave attitude of the bodhisattva. And that's the unique characteristic of the bodhisattva, compassion. So if you're on the Theravadan path, which is the wisdom wing, it's the teachings and practices shared that we share with the Theravadan practitioners, exactly the same. And if you graduate, if you're on the Theravadan path in Burma or Thailand, and that's your practice, and you're achieving, your goal is to achieve your nirvana. Your goal is to achieve your nirvana. That's your motivation, to get out of samsara. So life after life, you have that goal. That's your goal. And we need to have that. That's renunciation. We've got to have it. We add bodhicitta on top. But if you're just on that path, there's no bodhicitta there. They you know, in the teachings, they say there's bodhicitta, but most people don't achieve that. Most people have only the potential to become a hinayana, an arhata, to achieve your own nirvana, cessation of suffering. So your goal, life after life, is to get out of samsara. It's very powerful, very amazing. It's renunciation. It's incredible. So what happens is you keep practicing, and in one lifetime or other, when you've finally perfected your realization of emptiness, you've cut the root of all delusions and you're ready to zip into nirvana. What happens is, how would you be? Think about this. They emphasize all the time the cessation of suffering, the absence of attachment, and the absence of anger, and the absence of delusions. But flip it around. What would you be like? What would be in your mind instead? If you have no delusions left, what would be left? Well, love, compassion, bucket loads of it. You can't imagine how you'd be. You'd be an incredible person. But this is the point. By the time you die in that life, over all those lifetimes, your goal is your own nirvana. You've got compassion, but you also got bliss, because your mind, even when you got shamatha, you get bliss. So when you die, your bliss and your goal of achieving nirvana override your compassion, and you don't come back. Now, if you're on the Mahayana path, you go through the same stages. Maybe you even get to some point where you don't need to come back. But when you die, your great compassion overrides your bliss and your bodhicitta. It's my job. How can I possibly not come back? That's the crucial piece about compassion is not enough. It's got to be great compassion, mahakaruna. And then, of course, that culminates in bodhicitta, this powerful responsibility to never give up helping others. So Tonglen is like a bonus on top. It's like this extra level of insane compassion. You see someone with a crutch, oh, the poor person, I'm so sorry. Then you go, what can I do to help? Then you go with Tonglen, you go, you know what? Let me have the crutch. I'd rather have it than you. So it's an extra level. And it's just this more radical thought. A totally, not only what can I do to help, but give it to me. I can handle it. That's an outrageous attitude, I tell you. And if you could, you would. That's the point. You hear about people giving their lives for others. That's exactly what Tonglen is. You hear about it. I always remember reading it when you read these dramatic experiences, like the World Towers and all that business. So back in 2000, whenever it was. People running down the stairs to escape while some people ran up the stairs to help, There are people like that. Incredible, so inspiring. Put others first. It's hard to hear it. It's too scary, So Tonglen is this radical technique that puts all of these verses into practice, where you're saying, let me have it. I'd rather have the suffering. And that's why it's hard I can't even talk about it. I find it hard to express it all. But I know when Lama Zopa Rinpoche got his stroke in 2011, I was there in our teacher center in Australia, in a big course at the center there, where they're building the about 2 hours out of Melbourne, north of Melbourne, where I come from. And they were building, that's where they're building this replica of the Gyaltsen Stupa from Tibet. It's like an unbelievable project. Lama Yeshe wanted it first. And Ian Green has been doing it all these years, this Australian guy. Unbelievable project. And he said, even when I die, there'll be another 20 years of building things. It's this massive stupa with hundreds of statues and things. Unbelievable project. Unbelievable, amazing, wonderful, wonderful. So anyway, there were teachings there on the land. There were about 50 acres given by his parents years ago. Our teacher center, there's a monastery there. There's going to be a nunnery there. There's going to be a village there for people to live, and this big stupa. So Lama Zopa had his stroke. And the evening he had the stroke, they took him to the hospital, the local Catholic hospital, a private hospital, took him to the hospital. And Roger, I think, he videoed a little message from Rinpoche after he'd been diagnosed. And it was very hilarious because there was Rinpoche sounding like a drunken sailor. He could hardly talk. He's all sort of swollen and red. He sounded completely drunk because he had the stroke, you know. But he was hilariously funny, laughing like crazy. I mean, these nuns at this hospital, apparently, because they were there for a few weeks, Rinpoche was there, and then Roger, his attendant, just sat by his bed day and night, never left, and then his Tibetan attendants, and all these, and so these Catholic nuns could not get over these hilarious Buddhists, these monks, laughing, and Lama Zopa cracking jokes, and most people, when they get a stroke, they will have a mental breakdown. They have suffering, they're worried, they're fearful. He's laughing. I mean, it's hard to imagine this. And this is when you read all the teachings about somebody who's got bodhicitta. It's hard to hear it, but he was like his intense suffering. It's like the most perfect opportunity for these beings to increase their compassion like 4 billion times. They're like so happy to have this suffering because it's getting them closer to sentient beings. I mean, it's hard to use the words. I can't find the way to say it, you know. All I can do is see the evidence of it. Rinpoche laughing and cracking jokes, and he would say things like, just lying in the bed, and he'd be thinking, and he'd try to, I mean, they talk about taking on the suffering of others, imagining the suffering when you've got suffering. One of the practices of transforming problems is whenever you have a headache, you so happily think of, may I have the headache of every single sentient being. So when these people have suffering like this, I mean, they're not suffering. These people aren't suffering mentally. They're in bliss. It's hard to hear these words. It's hard to find the right words for it because it's not a normal human experience, you know. It seems to me that Rinpoche, whatever level he's at, I mean, I see him as a Buddha because he's my teacher. It like increased his compassion like 40 million times, you know. And it was hilariously funny, just like funny, cracking jokes and laughing. I remember one person told me when they at a meeting with His Holiness the Dalai Lama a couple of years later, and Rinpoche's attendant, Sangpo, a young Nepali monk who was like his butler, you know. And he was with Rinpoche, and His Holiness was there stroking Lama Zopa's right arm, which doesn't work properly. And he said, when did you know you had a stroke? To Rinpoche. And he said, when Sangpo laughed at me. I mean, that sounds hilarious, isn't it? Sangpo's sitting there and Rinpoche sort of slurring his words. Blah, blah, blah. So Sangpo laughs, you know. They sound like they're kind of heartless, but it's the opposite. Or when Sangpo laughed at me, Sangpo said. When Rinpoche said. I mean, I just can't find the words for it, because when we suffer, there's so much anguish and tears and worries and anxieties and drama and anger and fear. I mean, look at the way we suffer when things go wrong, you know. But when you've trained the mind to this degree, it's another world altogether. It's very astonishing, actually. I can hardly find the words to express it. So these practices are pretty intense, people. Try them once a month, pretty good, I swear. Now, also the key thing here is that this is utterly impossible without emptiness. By this point in your practice, So okay, in the Lam Rim, you haven't really got to the serious the 6 perfections yet. Once you've got bodhicitta after this, you then get to the next level of your final stages of your practice as a bodhisattva, which will be the next modules. And you go from life to life to life, perfecting these 6 practices. So the first four are you're perfecting the compassion wing in relation to others, generosity, good ethics or morality, patience and perseverance. And the last two, you're perfecting the wisdom wing, concentration and insight into emptiness. So those teachings come in the final stages. But of course, by this point, one has heard teachings in one's own progress. You've heard the teachings about emptiness. We've heard about dependent arising, and we've heard about karma, which is an example of dependent arising. So by this point, already we have a very powerful understanding of dependent arising. Things aren't so set in stone. So without understanding dependent arising and emptiness, these practices of transforming problems are literally impossible. It's like mental illness to think that when someone punches you in the nose, you're supposed to be happy. It's like you're a mentally ill person. It doesn't make sense in the worldly view, It doesn't make sense. Why? Because in our worldly view, in the materialist philosophical views of the mind and the world and the brain, neuroscience and psychology, it's a very fixed view that when someone harms you, of course you get angry, we'll say. In fact, if you don't get angry, you're considered weird. Of course you must get angry. You must get angry. In other words, in the teachings we have in the modern world, and this is samsara, the assumption of an intrinsic me is absolutely there as a basis. So here we're trying to smash that assumption. So the most powerful way, so this is why to understand emptiness is vital. As Lama Zopa said one time, if you don't, I think we discussed this, if you don't feel abused, where is the abuse? This is hard for us to hear, but this is emptiness. This is completely emptiness. That's why, for example, always my friends in prison, why Sunny came out of that prison happier and wiser and more fulfilled than she went in, because she was able to transform this nightmare into something to her advantage. She didn't talk about emptiness. She's not a Buddhist. She never discusses like that. But she clearly had this ability to reinterpret her experiences, which is exactly what you're trying to do with emptiness, because nothing has intrinsic nature. And finally, because everything exists, finally, most subtly, everything that exists in dependence upon the way you label it. That's what finally defines things. So that's clear. So this is absolutely central to transforming problems, because by definition, for the normal samsaric mind, a problem by definition is when attachment doesn't get what it wants, which then arises aversion, which sees it as bad. That's natural. That's the world. Join the universe. So here, we're trying to see it differently. And I always quote, as His Holiness was asked one time, how do you put emptiness into practice in daily life? He asked this man. And the answer was so simple, it's embarrassing. His Holiness said, see things from another point of view. That's dependent arising. You see, you've got the two truths, dependent arising and emptiness. Dependent arising is shorthand for how things do exist, conventional. Well, actually, illusory is the better word, as Lama Zopa says. Illusory existence. And then you've got the ultimate. And the word emptiness is the shorthand for the ultimate way things exist, the final way. Ultimate it's not fancy, it just means final, finally. Conventional, so, this is where, for example, what's a problem? Okay, think of my friends in prison. So first of all, if you're going to try and understand how something exists, you've got to first label it and define it. You have to be very clear conventionally. So what's a prison, mummy? Well, darling, it's a word that's used to refer to this ugly building, which is its character, its conventional characteristic. Most prisons I've been to are pretty ugly. Some are nice. Seems to me if you go to prison in Northern Europe, they're very nice. I had a friend in Norway email me, I've told you this, and he was so happy. He said, I'm so looking forward to my 2-year prison sentence, because he's going to the bush, he's going to the country, this lovely place in the country where he grew vegetables and got courses and classes and education. He couldn't wait to go there. I mean, that's a nice prison. You don't think that in America, I promise you, or most countries, you don't think like that. So this is the thing. A definition of something has two parts. One part tells you its conventional characteristics. So then the first part of the definition is this ugly building, you know, with barbed wire, and you can see it. There it is. And then but mummy, what's its function? What does it do? It keeps you, it keeps you locked up, doesn't it? It takes away your freedom. You can't escape. And you're sent there if you're naughty. So you put it that way. So then you go, oh, now I understand what a prison is conventionally. Now, that's a fact. This is the thing. Emptiness, for a start, does not deny that fact. So even in terms of ordinary world, a headache is a problem. The ordinary conventional language, a headache is a problem. In ordinary conventional language, it is true to say a headache is a problem. You don't go to the doctor when you say, oh, I've got no headache. Can I have a medicine, please? You don't say that. So conventional world is very it is what it is. There is a headache, there is a problem, there is up, there is down, there is one, there is two, there is good, there is bad. You name the word, you define it. So there is a character there. But this is the point. This is the problem. Because of ego grasping, which is based in fear, and then because it gives rise to attachment, which then gives rise to aversion when attachment doesn't get what it wants, these conceptual stories kind of elaborate what's there, exaggerate what's there, make it all confusing. There is a building that does have barbed wire, and when you go in, you can't go out. They are conventional facts. But because of delusions, it causes us to have a panic attack. Why? Because attachment is this junkie in us that only wants the nice things and can't cope with not being in control. So there's a panic attack of aversion. And when you freak out, so then you go to prison and you're depressed and you kill yourself or you want to kill everybody else. So we exaggerate everything, we elaborate everything, we put bells and whistles on everything. So there is a prison. You can't say there's not, but the point is this. So then you learn all about what a prison is. You learn the term, you learn the definition, and now you have to establish how it does exist. That's by thinking about the dependent arising of a prison. You think about the causes of a prison. Then you think about the prison, how it's labeled upon the basis. Prison is a name given to those bits and pieces, the parts, the bricks, the workers, you know, the barbed wire. You analyze the character conventionally of that prison in order to do what? To find what ego thinks is an intrinsic prison there. An intrinsic, absolute, from its own side, definite, having nothing to do with me prison. So you do the analysis of the dependent arising. What for? In order to trigger the insight into the ha-ha moment. Oh, I see. There is no intrinsic prison. That's emptiness. So emptiness is the conclusion you come to. You don't squeeze your brain going, prison's empty, prison's empty, prison's empty, hoping for something to happen. Prison's empty, there's no prison, there's no prison. That's silly. You engage in the thinking of dependent arising, conventional truth, and that triggers the insight into the ultimate. So emptiness is the conclusion you come to having thought about the conventional truth. So then, as Lama Zopa says, when you've realized that there is no intrinsic in and of itself prison from its own side without depending on my mind, that's emptiness. When you realize that absence, he says it's as if there's no prison. It's as if there is no prison. But conventionally, there is a prison. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't. This is a really perfect way to put it, the two truths together. When you realize that from the side of the prison, from the side of the barbed wire, the bricks, the mortar, the people, the cells, the workers, from there, prison, from there is not one atom of anything that makes it a prison. So when we hear that, we instantly throw the baby out with the bathwater, don't we? We fall into the abyss of the great mistake, nihilism, as Tsongkhapa calls it. The abyss of the great mistake. The instinct is, well, there's no prison. What the hell, who cares? That's nihilism, and that's not the right conclusion. So the insight into that there is no prison comes from thinking about what prison is and what prison's not, doing the analysis of dependent arising, this first truth. That's where you engage your mind. You analyze what is a prison. So let's just look. Let's start to look. Let's look for the prison. Let's look for the intrinsic prison that ego thinks is there, which is bad, of course. So you check, especially the parts. So you check, you know, like, well, this is what we do with the eye example, looking for the eye. It's the same one. We say a prison has bricks, a prison has barbed wire, a prison has wardens, a prison has cells. We talk like that, right? They're the parts of a prison. But when we say the prison has them, we're stating there is a prison that does exist, and then it's got parts. So there's a prison and there's parts. But no, you're not going to find that. That's the point. That's completely dualistic, because prison is nothing other than the word you use to refer to those parts. Prison is, this is a subtle one, prison is the name that's used conveniently to label upon those parts. So there's no prison apart from the parts. So when you realize that, it's as if there's no prison. It's so subtle, it's as if there's no prison. But there is a prison, but what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't exist. This is the way to put these two together. And this is the crucial piece about the two truths. Right now we have the two wrong views, and we like drunken sailors going crazily between each of the wrong views. One wrong view is, oh, well, there's no prison. What the hell? Who cares? It doesn't matter then. That's nihilism. Chuck the baby out with the bathwater. You fall into the abyss of the great mistake. This is the worst mistake, the worst misunderstanding of Buddha's teachings. Well, the other extreme is eternalism. Everything is existing. Things exist somehow intrinsically, you know. Both of these are lies. One over-exaggerates the nothing, and one over-exaggerates the something. So the middle way is right in between, right there, where once you begin to realize the dependent arising, that there is a prison that does exist in dependence upon this, that, causes, conditions, and finally the mind, that leads you to the middle way, because that tells you that it's empty from its own side. And whenever you think about emptiness, that leads you to the middle way, in the middle, where the two truths come together. And finally, when you're a Buddha, you have the cognition of these two simultaneously. It's only then that you've got the middle way. Finally, the non-dualistic view, when you realize that the prison is, that conventional truth is ultimate truth and ultimate truth is conventional truth, thinking like that. That's what Buddha tells us in the Heart Sutra. He lists, in the Heart Sutra, he lists, well, actually it's Avalokitesvara talking, isn't it? But he's channeling Buddha's views. Buddha's in meditation, but he's channeling Buddha's thoughts and speaking the words. And he basically takes all the different categories of phenomena according to the Buddha's logic, according to the Buddha's view of the world. You got the six perfect, you got the five aggregates, you know. Then you've got the 18 constituents, the six senses, the six sense bases, and the six objects of the six senses, 18. You've got the 12 links and the Four Noble Truths, all these different phenomena. And we have to think about each one in the same way, Buddha says. So, and then he says, he's using the example of the first of the five aggregates. He says, form is emptiness. Form is empty. Well, form is just the first of the five aggregates. And the five aggregates is this teaching that Buddha gave, where he presented a person divided into 5 bits. The first is form, which is referring to the physical. But you can put any word there. You can say prison. Okay, you can say prison is empty. So let's spell it out. He's saying the conventional reality of a prison is empty of existing as an intrinsic prison. The conventional, let's spell it out. The conventional prison, the dependent arising prison, is empty of being an intrinsic prison, is empty of being a prison from its own side. And then he goes, form is emptiness. Emptiness is, he said, then goes, emptiness is form. He switches around. So what that's saying is, the emptiness of a prison existing from its own side is a conventional prison. So he says form is empty. So prison is empty. And then emptiness is form. Emptiness is prison. Then he says form is empty, emptiness is form, and emptiness is nothing other than form, and form is nothing other than emptiness. All he's saying is, all he's saying, you see, first of all, you have to realize that emptiness, it doesn't refer to a nothingness. The word makes us sound like a nothingness. But it's not the nothingness. Emptiness doesn't refer to nothingness. It refers to the absence of something. The absence of something. So I use the ordinary example. So here I've got it. You can see it in my bright light shining. We can see if we've got good color, good eyes, we see that's green, okay? Can't we? We can see that's green. But if Tara's colorblind and she sees pink, we know she's in trouble because she's going to get confused. If I say, pass that green pencil sharpener, please, and she will say, there is no green pencil sharpener, and then I will accuse her of lying and we'll get a divorce, because her eyes are wrong. So it's like this. She's convinced it's green, it's pink. She's convinced her eyes are wrong. So we know her poor eyes are a problem. So we don't bully her into believing it's green. It won't help her. She has to cognize the truth that it's green. So what will we do? We'll help her fix her eyes, won't we? We'll send her off to the doctors and they'll fix her eyes and she'll come back and I'll present the green pencil sharpener again to her. Now listen to this. We will assume she'll see the truth now, won't we? But no, look what she'll see instead. She'll go, oh my God, it's not pink, won't she? Why? And this is the point now. Why will she say that? Because all her life, whenever green has been presented to her, she has seen pink. So she, in her mind, is an expectation of pink. She's got this massive expectation of pink. So when we fix her eyes, and that's the crucial piece, we present it to her, the fact is the truth will appear to her. But she will first see absence of pink. That's what emptiness is referring to, except it's not pink we're discussing. We'll go into that in a minute. So she will see the absence of pink. She will cognize mentally. Eyes don't see absence of pink. It's a concept. It's a construct because she's expected pink all her life. And suddenly she's now seeing the truth. She'll get the shock of her life and she'll go, oh my God, it's not pink. The phenomenon that she cognized, the name of the phenomenon she cognized. You see, the mind cognizes nouns. That's how the mind works. It always cognizes something. So what she's cognizing is a negative phenomenon, an abstract phenomenon called the absence of pink. It's very clear. If she picks up her cup, where's my thermos? I pick up my thermos and I go like this. I'll get a shock. No, I didn't get a shock because there is water there. But pretend there's no water there. I'll get a shock, won't I? Because why? Because I was expecting water. So when I discover there's no water, the object that I cognize is the absence of water in my cup. I'll get a shock. It's a negative phenomenon, the absence of something. I use these simple examples. If Tara's convinced there's $5,000 in her bank, she's convinced, she sees it, she knows it, and she looks in the bank and there's a zero there. She will see the zero, but what will appear to her mind vividly is the absence of $5,000. So it's clearly a construct. If I look in the bank and I'm not expecting $5,000, I'll just see the truth as zero. I'll just see the truth as green. So when there's a mistake in the mind, you build up that habit. And for lifetime, Buddha says, we've been seeing an intrinsic me. We've been believing in a me that exists from its own side, a self-existent me, a real me, a solid me, a pointable me, a concrete me, a real me, and a real prison and real everything else. But it's a lie. It's a lie. And so finally, when you've got single point of concentration in your meditation one day at 1 second past 3 p.m. on Friday, the 27th of January, 2999, whenever, for the first time, you will see nakedly, vividly, the fact that there never has been, isn't, and never could be a self-existent I. Just like pink has never existed there, but she's seen pink, believed in pink all this time. So the first thing she realizes is the absence of pink. Then she'll settle down and she'll see the conventional truth and she'll see the green. So in your mind as well, when you see for the first time, nakedly and clearly, after countless lifetimes of working on dependent arising, of using logic to break down the misconceptions, you will finally see the truth that there never has been, isn't, and never could be a self-existent me. That's emptiness. Then you will realize subtle dependent arising, the merely labeled I. Are we communicating, people? So prison, everything in the universe is the same. This argument refers to everything that exists, all the good, all the bad, the Buddha, hell, everything is like this. So without some semblance of understanding of this, it's not possible to see a problem as good. That's why for Lama Zopa is completely transformed everything. It's the source of joy, as nutty as it sounds to us. Because he's not only realized emptiness, he's got bodhicitta as well, you know. Well, that's why, as Krishna Sentra Rinpoche said, I'll never forget, talking about one level of bodhisattva, well before you're a Buddha, but this one level of bodhisattva has obviously realized emptiness already. The action for that bodhisattva of cutting off their hand and offering it to a starving animal is as inconsequential as a leaf falling off a tree. That's the level of compassion that we're talking about here, people. So don't rush, okay? Go one baby step at a time. As Lama Zopa says, start by giving just one tiny, tiny drop of your precious blood to a little mosquito. He only wants one drop. But look at the panic attack when we have one drop of blood stolen from this wretched mosquito, my blood. So start by giving one tiny drop of your precious blood. So I've been here for 2 years in Santa Fe. I haven't met a mosquito yet, so I don't need to do that yet. But I'll be going to India and Nepal soon. I'll meet plenty of them. This is the level of bodhicitta we're talking about. And without emptiness, that bodhicitta is not possible. Not possible. And only with emptiness, that's not possible either. So we're talking kind of radical, okay? So now it's time for you to ask me questions, please, darlings. 10 to the hour. Ask me some questions. Anything there, Tara?
Not yet.
Okay. Yes, Carol's got a question, has she? No?
Yeah.
Good, Carol, good, darling.
Venerable dear, thank you.
Thank you.
At the exact point of death, is emptiness apparent?
No, it's not. Okay, put it this, no, it's not. You've got to practice it. That's the whole point, Carol. You've got to practice, darling. That's why the yogis, that's why in Lama Zopa's book, How to Face Death Without Fear, there's a chapter, death is what the yogis have been waiting for. You see, because this is the point, Carol. Our mind, we go through these 8 stages of death, and in the sadhanas, it's all constructed. It's all part of these sadhanas in Tantra are constructed around this way of utilizing the death process with your visualization of the Buddha. So as you bring the Buddha in your visualizations, and then you go through the 8 stages of death. You imagine, we do imagine, the yogis do it actually when they've accomplished this. They go through these 8 stages, enabling their mind to go to ever more subtle levels, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, and they get to this 8th stage, which is what they call the clear light mind. Now, we've been through that billions of lifetimes, billions of deaths, but we've not been conscious of it. So the yogis are waiting for that opportunity because it's the subtlest level of mind at death, but they've practiced being conscious. So when that finally comes, that clear light mind, they're able to use it to realize emptiness quickly and easily and perfectly and even get enlightened.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah.
In other words, we're trying to access this microscope of our mind, which we do have the potential to have, and we've touched on it every time we go to sleep, every time we die, but we're unconscious of it. We don't know how to use it. So the yogis train in their meditations. So they go through the death process easily, getting the mind ever more subtle, constantly meditating on emptiness. And by the time to get to the clear light mind, when all the conceptuality has ceased, all the afflictions have ceased, you're able to utilize that clear light mind and quickly become the Buddha. The highest practitioners can do that.
So Venerable,
yeah.
if one lives a very long time and is a Buddhist practitioner as a Buddhist nun from the beginning and has built up merit, does that in any way prepare that, those subtle, how does
So listen, yes, you've got the wisdom wing.
Yeah.
Okay, Kat, you've got two, they talk about we've got to accumulate two big piles of things. We've got to accumulate merit, and we have to accumulate wisdom.
Yeah.
So classically, the wisdom wing is first subduing your delusions, controlling your body, speech, and mind, controlling your delusions, getting renunciation, and eventually getting shamatha, and eventually realizing emptiness. That's the wisdom wing. Then you add to that the compassion wing, and that's where you are smashing ego grasping, helping others, benefiting others, doing all your practices. That's where you create bucket loads of merit, and the merit enables the wisdom, but the wisdom also enhances the merit. You've got to have both wings. So living your life, benefiting others. It's sort of like you got to, another way of putting it is you got to pull out the weeds and you got to grow the flowers. That's the purification practices and the merit practices. And that's all the work you do to enable you easily to get wisdom. Here's the point.
Got it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You've got to, but you got to do, you can even lose bodhichitta, Carol.
Oh no.
Until a certain level. Without emptiness, but emptiness you can't lose. So emptiness is not enough. And compassion is not enough. You've got to have both. And they're very specific techniques and they're very specific approaches, and you've got to have a life of both. They support each other. In other words, very simply, every time you lessen attachment, you get closer to others. Every time you reach out to others, you lessen attachment. So they eat. We've got to do both.
Got to both. Okay, thank you. I do. Thank you.
Who else, people? Any questions there? Nothing. No questions. No questions about emptiness. It all made sense to
There's
us.
Christine. Christine has a question.
Good, darling, go.
Yes. So the bodhisattvas, they come back from nirvana, if I understood it correctly.
Christine, I'm a bit confused. What? Start again, darling. Say it again.
The bodhisattvas, they come back from nirvana to help the sentient beings.
In the first place, they never go away. They just don't come. They don't go away and then come back. They just don't go away. Even when they can, even if you don't need to return to a human body, as if you've got bodhicitta, you will happily continue to take a human body because you are driven by the wish to help others. It's like that. You don't go to nirvana and then come back. You just don't go. You just don't disappear. You stay. You understand?
Yes, thank you. But why don't the Buddhas come back? Why don't the Buddha?
My God, where did you think they don't? No, my goodness. No, listen. No, listen. No, listen. There are 10 stages of development on the bodhisattva path, and when you finally got all 10, you've finally become a Buddha. So even the lowest level bodhisattva already, and that means once you've realized emptiness, you're called a superior bodhisattva, Arya bodhisattva. There are 10 stages then to get to Buddhahood. So even the lowest level bodhisattva, driven by so much compassion, is able to manifest their mind in 100 different bodies to benefit others. And then you multiply that as it gets more and more, second stage, third stage, fourth. By the time you're a Buddha, you effortlessly are already manifesting your mind in countless bodies throughout all the universes for the sake of all sentient beings. It is impossible for you not to do that. Are we communicating?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
thank you.
Okay, good. What else, people? Questions? Any questions at all about anything? Come on, take the opportunity.
Kim, you can unmute.
Any questions, people?
Kim, you're not unmuted yet. There we go.
Go on, darlings, talk to me.
Yes, thank you, Venerable.
Good, sweetheart.
I heard you many times.
I've only got from my phone to find you, sweetheart. What does that imagine you do? Go on, talk to me. Okay, talk to me.
Okay, thank you, Venerable. As you mentioned, that the great yogis view death as a liberation.
Well, it's more, no, it's not, it's a bit too vague. For them, death is this amazing opportunity because they've practiced all their life enabling their mind to go to these subtler levels. They've trained themselves. Now the mind automatically and naturally will go through the stages and get to a very level. Because they've practiced, they will be able to utilize those subtler levels of mind, especially the 8th stage, which is the subtlest, which is clear light. And they use that microscope of their mind. Even the greatest yogis can actually become a Buddha then. So for them, yes, it's a very precious opportunity because it's a technical point. So then given that, yes.
Okay, so it isn't viewed as liberation. Death for them is.
No, not automatically. You've got to use it. You've got to do the work of utilizing the subtler mind because now you're conscious of it because you've practiced all your life being conscious at that subtler level. Can you hear that or not?
Rather,
Go on.
but I sometimes become confused when we pray for the long life of, say, the Dalai Lama.
Yes.
We pray for their long life.
Yes.
Isn't that a form of selfish attachment on our part?
It's not, darling. Okay, no, of course it's not, sweetheart. I mean, it's why? Because, we want the teachings. The reason bodhisattvas and Buddhas manifest in the first place in bodies is only to help us. They don't need a body. Let's just say the Dalai Lama, he is said to be a Buddha. I don't know he is, but they say he's a Buddha. So think of it. He, from his own side, does not need a body. He's gone beyond bodies. First of all, can you hear that point?
I do, definitely.
And the reason he's taken a body is for the sake of suffering sentient beings. He's chosen to be born in a body to help us. So clearly his purpose is to help us. So we would like him to be around till he's 100 million years old, because of course we want that. That's not selfish at all. We need his teachings and his reason. So it's a really mutually beneficial thing. He doesn't need a body, but he manifests as this lovely Tibetan man, and he's promises he's going to live for another 20 years. And we need that because we need to hear his teachings. How can we get teachings if there's no person in front of us? It's not selfish. It's intelligent. Can you hear me?
I do. That helps a lot, Venerable. Thank you.
Good. I understand your point. Thank you. What else, people?
Sabine?
Hello, Venerable. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
About the emptiness thing, if the conventional and the ultimate truth, if you see it at the same time, then it has something to do with time also.
What, darling?
It has. I don't understand. I understand it with how do you say intellectual?
Yeah.
But if you realize emptiness, then there is no element of time anymore, because now.
No, it's not a question. It's not really the point. It's not the point. It's bringing in something that's not relevant. It's just not necessary to say, no, it's got nothing to do with anything. Everything exists conventionally, including time and thermoses and good and good sense of sharpness. They have a conventional reality.
Okay.
When you finally achieved all the realizations, you will see a green pencil sharpener, but you will know simultaneously, putting it very simply. And the same with the concept of time. Time is just a green pencil sharpener is a construct. An iPad is a construct. So is time. So all things will be like that for you, including time.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, darling. Thank you. Who else?
CB?
Yes.
Girl?
Go.
Yes, Venerable. So if I understand correctly, the mind of clear light is a mind that has no more delusion.
Not
So
technically, no. The mind of clear light in an ordinary person is simply speaking, it's the subtlest level of your mind. It's the subtlest level. It's subtle. It's like the microscope of your mind. But you've got to look, you've got to use that microscope to see reality.
Okay.
It's the subtlest level. It's like a microscope, and you need to access that microscope. That's just my word, to see reality. So every time we die, we have the clear light mind, but we don't recognize it. So it's not in its nature free of delusions. It is temporarily free of delusions, but you've got to use it to see the truth, and then you will realize the absence of all the nonsense. You've got to use it. You with me?
Yes, I am. So basically, while you're dying, you arrive at the mind of clear light
at the time of death.
At the time of death, because you've been trained to do this mocking exercise throughout your life. So you're able to identify it at that moment
and use it. Yes.
And then you use it to realize emptiness. And then you use it to meditate on emptiness and bodhichitta.
Okay, good. Yes, you're right. But more precise, from the time of the first of the 8 stages, as your mind is the ordinary gross level, already as you're dying, the yogis, you would be meditating on emptiness. Then as your mind gets more subtle, you see emptiness a bit more deeply. As your mind gets more subtle, you keep seeing emptiness more subtly, until, and it's all the way through to the clear light. And then if you're the greatest yogis or yogini, you can stay there for days, weeks, even months, meditating at that point, achieving enlightenment.
So what makes you, why do you have an opportunity to become a Buddha? Is it because at that point you meditate on bodhichitta?
No, you meditate on emptiness.
But you said that you can become a Buddha as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's what you do. That's when you have all you accumulate all the right things, and you realize you then finally achieve Buddhahood at that point. Yes, exactly. But the implication there too is that bodhicitta is in your mind. You've been accumulating this merit all your countless lifetimes by practicing bodhicitta. And now this is a wisdom practice at the time of death. It's a wisdom practice, but it's enhanced by your bodhicitta, which you've been accumulating all those lifetimes.
I guess my question is, what makes it the difference that, for example, you become an Arahat at that moment as opposed to a Buddha?
Well, you wouldn't at this point. Okay, this practice is in Tantra, and the only people who practice Tantra are bodhisattvas. So if you're on the Hinayana path, you would not be doing this practice. It doesn't.
Okay, thank you.
Are you understanding?
Yes.
It's a good question. Yeah. So by definition, this practice is within the Vajrayana, which implies bodhicitta. So the yogi who is capable of going through these stages is only the yogi who's also got bodhicitta, not a possibility without bodhicitta. The mind would not be powerful enough. You with me?
Yes, but that yogi, but that yogi by definition hasn't realized emptiness, since he still has to realize it in the clear light.
No, she might well have realized emptiness at a certain point in their life, but because the clear light mind is so powerful, it enables you to cut the subtlest obstructions.
I understand.
Without this clear light, the only other situation in the Vajrayana where you can get to this subtlest level, but death is the most powerful, is in the Vajrayana practices of consort. The only time Lama Yeshe talks about this in this book.
Of orgasm, you mean?
The only way you can get to this very subtle level, even if you have shamatha, which is a Hindu practice, which the Hinayana arhats are using, you will realize emptiness. But that level of subtlety that you get with just shamatha is not powerful enough. Whereas the clear light mind of death is the most powerful. It's more subtle. It's a subtler microscope.
And when you said consort, does that mean orgasm?
Wait a minute. Not only will you realize emptiness, but you will also be able to remove the subtlest obstacles to omniscience at the same as well, because of this power of the mind, combined with the bodhicitta that you've got in your mind. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So good question. Good point, sweetheart.
You also mentioned the only other way that you can get to this subtlest level of mind is in the practice of the consort. Is that at the moment of orgasm?
She talks about this in his book called Bliss of Inner Fire. It's a certain level, and this is just with the practices of Vajrayana, where they utilize the energy of the human body in a very sophisticated way. Lama Yeshe's book is very clear about that. Can help. He can help. Yes. Death is the most powerful. Some yogis can become enlightened before death, but the best time is, if you're, the death is the most powerful one, the most powerful, subtle level of mind. Are we communicating?
Yes, thank you.
Good, good. Thank you, sweetheart. What else, people? What else is there?
Katharina?
Katerina, yes, talk to me.
Thank you, Venerable. Is it correct? Have I understood correctly that emptiness is a dependent arising?
Okay, thank you. First of all, Buddha's telling us that whatever exists, whatever does exist, by definition, exists interdependently. So if we can establish on this green pencil sharpener the absence of pink, then a phenomenon that does exist on this green sharpener is the phenomenon called the absence of pink. So a phenomenon can be called green, and that's an affirmative phenomenon. But we can also say for Tara, when she realizes that it's not pink, the name of that phenomenon is the absence of pink, which is a negative phenomenon, but it exists. It's a phenomenon that does exist. So the presence of green exists. The absence of pink exists right there on that green thermos. So green pencil sharpener. So when you realize on this person, the conventional person, when you realize the absence of intrinsic person, that phenomenon called the absence or the emptiness of intrinsic person is a phenomenon that does exist right here. So yes, the emptiness of intrinsic existence of the green pencil sharpener, the emptiness of the existence of Mary, the emptiness of the inherent existence of the iPad, they are phenomena that exist. So yes, emptiness is a dependent arising. Are we communicating?
Yes, thank you very much.
In other words, emptiness is not nothing, which is a typical way we hear it. It's the emptiness of something that exists. So form is empty. So conventional form is empty of intrinsic form. Now flop it around. The emptiness of intrinsic form is a phenomenon that exists right there on the conventional form. So they both are, one is an affirmative phenomenon and one is a negating phenomenon, but they are both phenomena. And phenomena, object of knowledge, existent, are all synonyms. They're all the words used to refer to that which exists. And whatever can be established as existing is necessarily a dependent arising and is therefore necessarily empty of existing from its own side, including the phenomenon called emptiness of form, emptiness of me, emptiness of iPad. So emptiness is something that does exist right there on something. Are we clear? Are you clear about that? And if you're not, say, and I can keep.
I have to do a bit more thinking, but yeah, I got the gist.
And this is an important discussion. Once this clicks in our head, it's easy. Tell me what you understood from what I said in your own words, and don't feel embarrassed.
I understood that you can see it from both sides. It exists, and you can say it is the absence of something else. So the pencil sharpener is an object, a green object, but it's also one that is absent of pink.
Okay, pink. Forget the pink one. Let's just use emptiness of intrinsic. Who was talking to me again?
Katerina.
Katerina. Okay, good. Listen, Katerina. Okay, so we can establish there is a person called Katerina. You're not called Sabine. You're not called Andrea. You're not called Jeffifer. You're called, this person is talking is called Katerina, correct? It's a valid label for you, isn't it? Answer me. Okay,
yes,
good.
it is.
Now that's the conventional So Katerina is a phenomenon. Katerina is an existent. Katerina is a type of phenomenon called a person. So there she is. We label this. So what are we labeling Katerina? We're labeling the parts, aren't we? Your body and mind. Would you agree?
Yes.
So the body and mind of Katerina are the basis of the label Katerina. You agree with that?
Yes, I do.
So conventionally, that's Katerina. So now when you've thought about the existence of Katerina in terms of causes, and then you've thought about where is the Katerina that she believes exists, this intrinsic Katerina, and you do your analysis on those parts, the body and the mind, you will not find any intrinsic Katerina. So what you will find finally is you will realize there is no intrinsic Katerina. That's the word for that realization is the realization of emptiness. Emptiness is the absence, in this case, it's the absence of intrinsic Katerina.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a phenomenon. Okay, now start again. Can you have a cognition that that's green? Yes?
Yes.
And can you have a cognition that it's not pink?
Yes.
They're both cognitions, aren't they?
Yes.
They're both parts. You can know it with your mind, right?
Yes.
So in the first cognition, the mind always cognizes an object, it cognizes something, not meaning physical, but mind always cognizes something. Mind is subject, and what it cognizes is called the object. You got that?
Yeah.
So in this case, green is the name of the object of your cognition, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, you agree?
Mm-hmm.
You agree. So let's say you were like Tara and you thought it was pink, and now you realize it's not pink. Let's understand that, right?
Yeah.
So
right.
okay, what's the name of the object of the cognition?
It's not pink.
No, absence of pink.
Absence of pink.
Emptiness of pink.
Yeah.
It's a negating object, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't see with your eyes the absence of pink. It's a construct, isn't it? It's a conceptual construct. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So then, listen. Green is a conventional phenomenon, and it's the object of your cognition. That's a conventional phenomenon. The other phenomenon, the negating one, when you realize that, you realize the object that you're realizing is called the absence of green, the absence of pink. So when you realize the emptiness of intrinsic Katerina, you realize that there's a phenomenon called the emptiness of intrinsic Katerina, and that is a quality that exists on that body and mind. The absence of pink is a quality that exists on this green. So Katerina is empty, and emptiness of intrinsic Katerina is conventional Katerina. Katerina is empty, emptiness is Katerina. Katerina is nothing other than emptiness, and emptiness is nothing other than Katerina. So the emptiness of intrinsic Katerina is a characteristic of conventional Katerina. And you can't find the absence of intrinsic Katerina without a conventional Katerina. How could you do that? How can you find green without a pencil sharpener? You've got green as a characteristic that exists on this pencil sharpener. So emptiness of intrinsic Katerina exists right there on Katerina, the conventional one. Are we communicating?
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
So in other words, emptiness of something is just a thing that exists. Just that it's negating instead of, like if you get your cup of tea, my thermos, there's two options. There's either tea in here or there's absence of tea, isn't it? So I drink the tea. Tea is a phenomenon that exists in my cup. Well, if there's no tea here, the absence of tea exists in my cup. So if there is a Katerina, an ultimate one, there is a Katerina, but there's an absence of Katerina, an absence of intrinsic Katerina existing right where? On these parts. So you can't have Katerina without emptiness of Katerina. You can't have conventional without ultimate. You can't have dependent arising without emptiness. And you can't have emptiness without dependent arising. They come together.
The absence of Katerina is that, how did I say it? With the pencil sharpener, when I get this eye operation, I cognize or perceive the absence of pink.
What you thought was there before, put it that way. You've always believed in something that didn't exist, haven't you? You've always believed in something that didn't exist, right?
Yeah,
yeah. There never has been pink. And then the day you fix your eyes, you realize the truth. There never has been pink on this green thing. Same with yourself. Same with emptiness of intrinsic eye.
Yeah. And there's always for example, never been any yellow. So, but
Sorry, what?
there's not been yellow either. But I don't perceive this object in the sense of absence of yellow because my
now you're confusing it by saying that.
Okay.
That's not the issue at all here. That's why this example doesn't work if you say that. It's not the point.
okay, all right,
All I'm using is to get our head around this concept of the absence of something.
okay,
We're not thinking that way. It's just it's a quaint way of talking. So this is just, but it's got nothing to do with anything else. So please don't confuse it. That just really gets it confused, darling.
okay.
All we're saying is, Buddha says that we believe in the depths of our being that in here, among the body and the mind, we will find a third component called I. Put it that way. We simply believe there is an I in here along with the nose and the ear and the mind and the anger. We think there's a body and a mind and there's I. He's simply telling us there's no such third piece called I. You don't need one, he says. We've added it on. It's a bell and a whistle. So we have to realize the absence of that. We have to realize that it never has, doesn't, and never could exist. And anyway, you don't need it. Speaking simply, it's like that. You with me?
Yes, yes, much clearer. Thank you.
Good. It's very helpful. So good, these things. What else, darling people? It's nearly time to go home. 10 minutes. It's the last one. So we better conclude. Okay, we better conclude. Let's conclude. Huh?
Lorna, go ahead.
Yes.
Cool.
Hi, Robina.
Yes, darling.
Thank you.
Good.
So just to carry on with that, so there is no intrinsic existence from its own side for any phenomena.
No,
So-
no phenomena yet. There is no intrinsic existence on any phenomenon. There is no phenomenon can have an intrinsic existence. Put it that way. Yeah. No phenomenon can have an intrinsic existence. It's not a possibility because it implies anything, and it's not possible.
Right. And so what I'm thinking of is then and that's because everything appears as a result of causes and conditions.
No, that's only the first level. There are 3 levels of dependent arising, Lorna. And the very first one is that Lorna first exists in dependence upon causes. That's karma. The more subtle level, Lorna exists in dependence upon her bits and pieces. And finally, Lorna exists in dependence upon the mind labeling Lorna. 3 levels of dependent arising.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much.
Good, darling. So among all those causes and conditions, you will not find a Lorna, because Lorna is nothing other than the product of those causes and conditions, those causes. I always remember when I studied with Geshe Tektok, my philosophy teacher in the late 70s in England. And in the class, he used the example of the phenomenon called Robina, which of course is why I remember it. And he said, it can be said that everything in the universe up to the first moment of Robina is validly a cause or a condition for the existence of Robina. And if you do that analysis, it's true. That's just causes, but that's not enough to remove the subtlest imprint of ego grasping. Then the second one you do is you go for a more precise one. You learn to look for the intrinsic Lorna within the body and the mind, because we're convinced it's there. And when you've established there is no Lorna, there's no piece called Lorna walking hand in hand, as my friend Pende says, with the nose, with Lorna's eyes and Lorna's anger and Lorna's love. There is no piece called Lorna. And third, finally, you realize Lorna is merely labeled. They're the levels of dependent arising we have to go through. You with me?
Yes,
Lorna?
thank you. That's fabulous. Thank you so much.
Good, great. What else, darling people? So this is the 8th verse, isn't it? That we'll see that, we'll see everything is illusory. So this illusory one, this is where we conclude. This is where, so in your meditation, you are merely cognizing the absence of intrinsic existence. And they say that means just there's no appearance of anything. You're merely cognizing the absence of intrinsic existence. Then when you open your eyes and you join the world again, suddenly all the world's appearances appear to you. Trees and moons and green, things and iPads and paper and all the billions of phenomena of the universe. But the thing is this, when you realize in your meditation with confidence, with certainty, there is no intrinsic this or that, then when you see the thises and the that's, they appear to exist from their own side, but you're not fooled by it. They appear as illusory. So you join the world, you use your cup, and this is the point. When you realize the emptiness of intrinsic existence of your cup of tea, ultimately, but conventionally, your tea will function, this cup of tea will function exactly as you established. It will quench your thirst, but it doesn't exist from its own side. So emptiness reinforces reality. It doesn't deny it. And dependent arising reinforces emptiness. This is when you got the two truths together. So in emptiness, there is merely the absence. And in conventional reality, you see everything, but you see it as illusory. They have all these analogies, like a star, like a dream, like a water bubble. They use the example of the magicians. There used to be magicians once upon a time who could, just by saying a mantra or some clever thing, they could conjure a horse. Everybody in the audience, the analogy being ordinary samsaric people, see the horse and believe it's a horse. The yogi who conjures the horse also sees the horse, but knows it's not a horse. It's illusory. So that's the practice. Realize emptiness in your meditation and see everything as illusory. So the knife will still, your illusory knife will cut your illusory cake. Your illusory tea will quench your illusory thirst. Emptiness doesn't deny, it reinforces. It's really subtle putting these two together. All right, darling people, that should do us, I think, 5 minutes to go. So we just sit there, close your eyes and relax and just, I don't know, just see the nature of your mind. Do Mahamudra. Just relax, very natural, so natural. And just imagine your mind vast and clear and have no thoughts. Just try and imagine no thoughts. Just relax, relax in the delicious nature of your own clear mind. All right, darling people. So we totally delight in these us 4 classes on about transforming problems, have some courage to understand it. The more we realize dependent arising, the easier it will be. And the more we get some compassion, the easier it will be. And so we delight in this and we do our best. And we delight. All these seeds we've planted, may we nourish them, nourish these seeds from this moment forward with our effort, with our work, with our realizations, our understanding, our virtue, our goodness, our wisdom, nourishing them every day so that they do ripen just as we motivated as our Buddhahood, no matter how long it takes, for the sake of sentient beings. Kewaji Nyutu Daglama Sange Drubgyune Drowachi Kyang Marupa Deyi Sala Gopashog Ke Jangchob Semchog Rinpoche Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyuchig Ke Panyampa Mepayang Gongne Gondu Pebashog. Okay, honey child, all of you honey children. So next week I will talk to you from 5 o'clock on Friday morning in New Zealand. So if I get up in time, maybe Lars is going to have to send me a little text, wake me up.
Yes.
It'll be Friday morning in New Zealand. It's going to be a bit chilly there. It's winter there, but apparently it's very nice. It's called Mahamudra Center, where I'm going to be doing a 10-day retreat on Mahamudra Lama Yeshe's teachings. And then I'll be in Australia, in Melbourne for 15 days, seeing all my sisters and brothers and 27 grandchildren. Probably not grandchildren. What do you call them? I'm an auntie, so great nieces and nephews. I think I've lost track of them. So many. And there's another level as well as great. I think there's a great grand one as well. There'll be 15 days seeing all my brother and my 5 sisters and their families and everything. And then I'll be in Sydney for a little bit, and then I'll be in Adelaide for a little bit, and then I'll be in Brisbane and Queensland for a little bit. And then I'll be walking up the mountains again in October up to Laudo. I hope I make it. Except I'll be using helicopters on the way. All right, darling. So if I survive all that, I'll be back and I'll continue to see you. But through all this, I think we finished in September when I'll be in Australia. And in Australia, it'll be 3 a.m. You'll be getting me up at 3 in the morning. So I really have to make it. And that'll be our last little piece for this entire year. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? One entire year. Kind of outrageous. All right, precious ones. See you next week. Much love. Never give up. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Marina.